The great chamber of Concordia Prime hummed with translated voices from 47 different species. Minho sat in the human delegation section, his hands folded calmly on the table before him. To his left, Giwan reviewed tactical data on her tablet. To his right, Doyen made quiet notes about the various alien representatives. They all knew what was coming. The entire galaxy knew what was coming. The humans had been part of the Galactic Assembly for 300 years. 300 years of following every rule, signing every treaty, accepting every limitation placed upon them. They were the newcomers, the young species, the ones who should be grateful just to have a seat in this chamber. That was what everyone believed. Hyjin rose from her position at the Council of Dominance table. The Velen High Arbiter was tall and pale, with forearms that moved in practiced, elegant gestures. Her species had ruled a quarter of the galaxy for 5,000 years. She looked down at the human delegation with something that might have been pity. "We come to Resolution 7845, Hyjin announced. Her voice carried through the translation systems in perfect clarity. Regarding the rapid expansion of human settlements and military presence in contested territories, Minho did not move. He had read the resolution already. Every human diplomat in the galaxy had read it. They had discussed it, analyzed it, and prepared their response. The Council has determined that humanity poses a growing destabilization risk, Hyjin continued. Your military vessels operate with insufficient oversight. Your colonies expand without proper authorization. Your behavior threatens agreements that have maintained peace for millennia. Around the chamber, other species nodded their agreement. The Sun Concordat representatives clicked their mandibles in approval. The Dreven Republic delegation remained silent but did not object. This was how things worked in the assembly. The elder races decided, and the younger races obeyed. Therefore, Hyjin said, her forearms spreading wide, the Council requires the following actions from humanity. First, immediate surrender of all military vessels to Velen custody for decommissioning. Second, dismantling of all defensive networks and weapons platforms. Third, acceptance of protective governance from appointed Velen administrators on all human worlds. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant background hum of translation systems seemed to fade. You have 72 hours to comply, Hyjin finished. Failure to do so will result in corrective military action for the safety of the galaxy. Minho felt Juwan tense beside him. Doyon stopped writing, but Minho kept his breathing steady. He had prepared for this moment for years. Humanity had prepared for this moment since they first received the invitation to join the assembly 3 centuries ago. He stood slowly. Every eye in the chamber turned toward him. Some species looked curious. Most looked expectant. They wanted to see how quickly the humans would bow. The human assembly respectfully declines, Minho said. His voice was calm and clear. The translation systems took a moment to process his words. When they did, the chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. Hyjin's forearms froze in mid-gesture. You cannot decline a council resolution, she said. Her voice had lost its pitying tone. Now it carried an edge of anger. Can, and we do, Minho replied. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of those species who would meet his gaze. For 300 years, we have honored every treaty. We have followed every rule. We have accepted our place as junior members of this assembly. But we will not surrender our sovereignty. We will not place our people under foreign governance. We will not disarm while others remain armed. This is unprecedented, said Tholis, the ancient archon of the Sun Concordat. His insectoid face turned toward Minho with what might have been shock. No junior race has ever refused a council resolution, and we are the first, Minho said simply. Giwan and Doyon stood. They began gathering their materials with quiet efficiency. Datapads, documents, everything the human delegation had brought to this session. If you walk out of this chamber, Hyjin warned, you walk out as enemies of the assembly. Every species here will consider humanity a rogue state. You will be isolated, sanctioned, and ultimately destroyed. Minho picked up his own materials. We tried peace your way, he said. We tried diplomacy your way. We tried cooperation your way. And at every step, you worked to keep us weak. You interfered with our trade? You sabotaged our diplomatic relations. You created incidents and blamed us for them. All because you fear any young race that might challenge your control. These are lies, Hyjin said, but her voice wavered slightly. They are documented facts that we will release to every independent news network in the galaxy, Doyon said quietly. 3 centuries of evidence. Every treaty you violated while demanding we follow them perfectly. Every time you moved the boundaries and expected us not to notice. Every other junior race you absorbed through these same tactics. The chamber had gone silent again. Some delegates looked uncomfortable. Others looked angry. But many looked curious. You came here expecting us to surrender, Minho said. He walked toward the exit, Jiwan and Duan following. You expected us to bow because that is what every other young race has done. But we are not every other race. We learned long ago what happens when you appease bullies. We learned what happens when you trade freedom for the promise of safety. He reached the massive doors of the chamber. They were ornate things, carved from some alien wood that supposedly came from the first world to join the assembly. They were meant to inspire awe and respect for tradition. Minho turned back one last time. We do not want war. We have never wanted war. But if you bring war to our homes, you will learn why humanity survived 10,000 years of fighting each other before we ever reached the stars. You will learn why we never forgot how to fight, even during 3 centuries of pretending to be harmless. This is your final warning, Hyjin said. Her voice had turned cold and hard. Return to your seats and accept the council's judgment or face the consequences. Minho smiled. It was not a happy smile. We have faced consequences before. We will face them again. But we will face them as free people, not as subjects. He pressed the door control. The massive panels swung open with a deep, resonant sound that echoed through the entire chamber. The 3 humans walked out, their footsteps steady and unhurried. The doors closed behind them. That sound echoed too. It was the sound of an era ending. For 300 years, humanity had played by the galaxy's rules. That time was over. Inside the chamber, Hyjin stood frozen. Around her, delegates began shouting again. Some demanded immediate military action. Others called for sanctions. A few suggested negotiation. But Tholis, ancient and experienced in ways most species could not imagine, said nothing. He watched the closed doors and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Not fear, exactly. Not yet. But the beginning of understanding that the galaxy had just changed in ways that could not be predicted or controlled. Outside the chamber, Minho walked with Giwan and Doyon toward the docking bay where their shuttle waited. They did not speak. There was nothing left to say. They had delivered humanity's answer. Now, everything else would be decided by actions, not words. Behind them, in that great chamber on Concordia Prime, the galaxy began to mobilize for war. They expected it to be brief. They expected humanity to break quickly. They had no idea what was coming. The bridge of the Dreadnought Indomitable was quiet when the sealed orders arrived. Captain Seogen opened the encrypted file and read it twice. Then he looked up at his crew and nodded once. All hands to battle stations, he said calmly. This is not a drill. Yuna, his tactical officer, began pulling up star charts and defensive formations. She had served with Seogen for 8 years. She knew his voice, knew when he was concerned and when he was confident. Right now, he was neither. He was focused. They really did it, she said softly. They walked out. They did, Seogen confirmed. He pulled up the fleet-wide communication system. Around them, the Indomitable's crew moved with practiced precision. Every person knew their role. Every system came online exactly as it should. In the engineering section deep in the ship's core, Taijin watched his displays as the reactors powered up to combat levels. The human fusion drives ran hotter and harder than any galactic equivalent. Other species thought it was reckless. Humans called it efficient. All systems green, he reported. We can push to 120% if needed. We will need it, Seogen replied. He switched to the fleet channel. 200 ships scattered across a dozen systems. All received the same orders at the same moment. On Luna, humanity's oldest off-world settlement. Admiral Junho stood in the command center and watched tactical displays that showed every human ship in known space. He was older than Cyojin, gray-haired and lined from decades of military service. He had fought in the border wars 30 years ago, the last time humanity had faced an external threat. That had been pirates and raiders, small groups with improvised weapons. This would be different. Third Fleet is moving to Beta Serpentis, reported one of his staff officers. 7th Fleet confirms position at Tau Ceti. 5th Fleet is holding at Earth. And the Velen response? Junho asked. Their 5th Armada is mobilizing. 312 ships. They are heading directly for Beta Serpentis. Junho nodded slowly. The Velens were predictable. They would make an overwhelming show of force, expecting humanity to see reason and surrender. They had done this to 15 other junior races over the past millennium. It had always worked. Let them come, Junho said. Cyojin will be ready. Cross human space on 30 colony worlds. The mobilization happened without panic. Yonji stood in the community center on New Pyongyang and watched the emergency broadcast with her neighbors. She was an agricultural engineer, spent her days designing irrigation systems and crop rotation schedules. But like every human adult, she had completed military training. Universal service was not negotiable in human society. Everyone learned to fight because humanity remembered what happened when only a few knew how. All citizens with technical skills report to the Planetary Defense Center, the broadcast announced. All citizens with medical training report to the emergency hospitals. All citizens with logistics experience report to the supply coordination offices. Yanji kissed her husband and walked to the defense center. The building had been empty for years, maintained but unused. Now, it filled with people like her. Civilians who were transforming back into soldiers. The orbital weapons platforms came online one by one. These were not decorative. They were not symbolic. They were real weapons, maintained in secret against this exact scenario. The elder races had forbidden military buildups by junior races. Humanity had agreed, then quietly prepared anyway. Do you think we can win? Asked a young man next to Yunji. He was barely 20, probably had finished his service training only a year or two ago. I think we can make them regret starting this, Yunji said. She began running diagnostics on the satellite network. Everything worked perfectly. Humanity had spent 3 centuries preparing for a war they hoped would never come. On the Indomitable, Nari sat at her communication station and monitored galactic frequencies. She could hear the Velen military channels, their confident chatter as they assembled their armada. They talked about humanity the way hunters talked about prey. Small, weak, easily caught. They think this will be over in a week, she reported to Cyojin. Good, he replied. Confidence makes people careless. The 3rd Fleet settled into position around Beta Serpentis. It was a human colony system, 3 planets with a combined population of 40 million. The Velens would come here first to make an example. Show humanity what happened to those who defied the Council. Cyojin studied the tactical display. His ships were arranged in a formation that made no sense by galactic military doctrine. They were to spread out, too exposed. Any military academy in the assembly would fail a student for suggesting such a deployment. But human military academies taught different lessons. They taught mobility and initiative. They taught combined arms and adaptive tactics. Most importantly, they taught that doctrine was a starting point, not a religion. Yes. All ships confirm ready status, Yuna reported. The Velens will be in range in 6 hours. Sejin nodded. 6 hours. Time enough to eat, to rest, to write a message home. He kept a picture of his daughter in his quarters. She was 7 years old, lived on Mars with her mother. He wanted her to grow up free, to live in a galaxy where humans could walk with their heads high. Captain Taijin called from engineering. Request permission to run the reactors at combat temperature.
Ow.
Granted, Cyojin said. The Indomitable's power output climbed. Around them, every ship in the fleet did the same. They were burning through fuel faster than galactic ships would ever dare. But galactic ships were designed for long campaigns and minimal risk. Human ships were designed to win. Admiral Junho watched from Luna as the Velen Fifth Armada crossed into Beta Serpentis. They came in tight formation, shields at maximum, weapons charged. It was textbook galactic warfare, the same tactics used for 3,000 years. Recording all channels, Junho ordered. Whatever happens next, the galaxy needs to see it. In the defense center on New Pyongyang, Yunji and her fellow volunteers finished bringing the satellites online. Every weapon system showed green. The orbital defenses could not stop an armada, but they could hurt one badly. And hurt was sometimes enough. Do you think they know? The young man asked again. Do you think the Velens know what they are walking into? Yunji thought about that. She thought about 3 centuries of human history in space. 3 centuries of following rules while quietly preparing for the day those rules became chains. 3 centuries of being underestimated, dismissed, treated as harmless. Oh, no, she said finally. I do not think they know. They have forgotten what it means to fight someone who has something to lose. They have forgotten what it means to face an enemy who would rather die than surrender. On the Indomitable, Seojin stood and stretched. 6 hours had become 1 hour. The Velen Armada was visible now on long-range sensors, a massive formation that could glass a planet. Open a channel, he ordered. Nari worked her console. Channel open, sir. The face of a Velen fleet commander appeared on the screen. He looked bored, like this was a routine patrol instead of an invasion. Human vessels, the Velen said. You are ordered to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Resist, and you will be destroyed. Seojin studied the alien face. He wondered if this being had a family, if he had children who would miss him. Then he pushed the thought away. This was not personal. This was survival. Came to our home, Seojin said quietly. You will not leave it. He closed the channel before the Velen could respond. All ships, he broadcast to the fleet. Remember your training. Remember why we fight. And remember that the galaxy is watching. Yuna brought weapons online. Taijin pushed the reactors to their limits. Nari prepared the jamming systems. Around them, 200 human warships made final preparations. The Velen Armada advanced, confident and proud. They had done this before. They knew how it would end, but they were wrong. They had never faced humans before. They had never fought a species that spent 10,000 years perfecting warfare against itself. They had never encountered an enemy that treated peace as a precious thing and war as a necessary evil they were about to learn. The Battle of Beta Serpentis began exactly as galactic battles had begun for 3,000 years. The Velen Fifth Armada moved into range at a steady, measured pace. Their shields were layered and strong, their energy weapons charged and ready. They formed a wall of ships 300 strong. A formation designed to maximize defensive coverage while projecting overwhelming firepower. Fleet Commander Volush stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the human forces with something close to amusement. 200 ships against his 300, and the humans were scattered like debris instead of properly formed. This would be over quickly. Then he could move on to Earth itself and end this foolish rebellion. All ships, he commanded. Advance to optimal firing range and prepare to engage. The Velen Armada moved forward. At 50,000 kilometers, they opened fire. Brilliant beams of concentrated energy lanced across space, targeting the nearest human vessels. This was the standard opening of galactic warfare. Long-range energy weapons, striking shields. A careful dance that could last for hours or even days as shields and weapons wore each other down. On the Indomitable, Seojin watched the energy beams splash harmlessly against their shields. Humanity had studied galactic weapons for 3 centuries. They knew exactly how much power those beams carried, exactly how long their shields could withstand them. Yuna, he said calmly, execute Pattern Delta. Pattern Delta, confirmed, Yuna replied. Her hands moved across her console. The Third Fleet suddenly broke formation. Instead of maintaining a defensive line and returning fire at range, the human ships accelerated. They did not move at the careful, fuel-efficient speeds of galactic warfare. They burned their reactors hot and pushed their engines to limits that would horrify any alien engineer. In engineering, Taijin watched his displays as the Indomitable's fusion core climbed to 130% of rated capacity. Warning alarms screamed, but he ignored them. Human ships were built with margins of safety that assumed combat conditions. What the galactic races called catastrophic overload, humans called Tuesday. Reactor stable at 130, he reported. I can push to 150 if needed. Hold at 130, Seijin replied. We need endurance, not just speed. The human ships closed the distance at velocities that seemed insane. 50,000 kilometers became 40, then 30, then 20. The Velen commanders hesitated, confused. This was not how battles were fought. This was not how civilized species conducted warfare. Volosh stared at his tactical display. What are they doing? They are going to ram us. But the humans did not ram. At 15,000 kilometers, they opened fire. The first human weapons were not energy beams. They were metal slugs, simple chunks of dense alloy accelerated to a fraction of light speed by magnetic rails. Kinetic weapons were considered primitive by galactic standards, too slow and too easy to dodge at long range. At 15,000 kilometers, they were not slow. They were death. The Velen shields, designed to dissipate energy. They did nothing against solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. The slugs punched through like they were not there. Ships that had weathered 3,000 years of traditional combat suddenly found themselves torn open by projectiles that carried the force of asteroids. Shields are not stopping them. Someone shouted on the Velen command channel. Evasive maneuvers, Velesh ordered. Break formation and scatter. But breaking formation made things worse. The human ships darted between the scattering Velens like wolves among sheep. At point-blank range, they fired missiles. Not the slow, ponderous missiles of galactic design, but fast-burning rockets with nuclear pumped. Laser warheads that detonated in brilliant flashes of focused radiation. Nari worked her communication jamming systems, flooding the Velen channels with noise and confusion. Human electronic warfare had been refined through centuries of humans fighting humans. They knew every trick, every exploit, every way to disrupt an enemy's coordination. The Velen formation dissolved into chaos. Ships tried to maneuver, but they were designed for careful, predictable movements. The humans moved like atmospheric fighters, rolling and diving and accelerating in patterns that made no sense in three-dimensional space. Yuna coordinated the Indomitable's weapons with cold efficiency. Railgun, slugs, missiles, and then the lasers. Human lasers were not like galactic energy beams. They were focused, intense bursts designed to burn through armor at close range rather than wear down shields at a distance. Target their engines, Seijin ordered. We want survivors, not massacres. The Third Fleet's focus shifted. Instead of destroying ships completely, they crippled them. Engine modules exploded. Power systems failed. One by one, Velen warships drifted helpless and powerless. Velesh watched his proud armada die. 3 hours. It took only 3 hours for 300 years of galactic military doctrine to become obsolete. His flagship shuddered as human weapons found their mark. The main reactor went offline. Life support switched to emergency power. Surrender. His second-in-command asked quietly. Volush looked at the tactical display. Of his 312 ships, 47 remained combat-capable. The rest were drifting wrecks or spreading debris. The human fleet showed damage, yes. Several ships were destroyed, others limping. But they still held the field. Yes, Volosh said. Signal surrender. On the Indomitable, Nari picked up the surrender signal. Sir, the Valens are requesting terms. Seijin nodded. Broadcast coordinates for prisoner pickup on all frequencies. Tell them we will provide medical assistance and supplies. And Nari, make sure every news network in the galaxy receives complete footage of this battle. Sir. Nari looked confused. The galaxy needs to see this, Seijin explained. They need to understand that we are not monsters. We fight when attacked, but we do not execute prisoners. We do not glass planets. We fight until the threat is stopped. Then we help the wounded. Yuna looked at him with something like respect. The Velans would have destroyed every ship and called it justice. That is why they lost, Siajin said simply. They forgot that warfare has rules, even when those rules are unwritten. They forgot that how you fight matters as much as whether you win. Around Beta Serpentis, the human fleet began recovery operations. They pulled Velan survivors from damaged ships, provided medical care, broadcast locations for rescue vessels. The colonists on New Pyongyang watched from their orbital defenses as human ships turned from warriors to rescuers. EUNG watched the feeds and felt something complicated in her chest. Pride, yes, but also sadness. So many dead on both sides. So much destruction. All because the elder races could not accept that younger species had the right to say no. Is it over? The young man asked her. He looked shaken, watching the footage of the battle. No, Youngji said. This was just the first fight. The galaxy will not accept this. They will not accept that we won. They will come again, with more ships and more anger. But now they know. Now they understand that we mean what we say. On Luna, Admiral Junho watched the battle footage for the third time. He saw the tactics, the precision, the controlled violence. He also saw the mercy, the rescue operations, the care for enemy wounded. This was what human warfare looked like when it was done right. Brutal when necessary, humane when possible. Send a message to all human forces, he ordered. Well done. Now, prepare for the next wave. Across the galaxy, the footage of Beta Serpentis spread like wildfire. News networks showed it again and again. The elder races watched in shock as their most powerful military force was shattered in 3 hours. The junior races watched in hope as humanity proved that the elder races could be beaten. In the Galactic Assembly, Jin watched the footage in silence. Around her, other council members shouted and argued. Some demanded immediate escalation. Others called for negotiation. A few suggested that perhaps humanity had a point, but Haijin knew the truth that none of them wanted to speak aloud. The galaxy had changed. The old order, where elder races ruled and junior races obeyed, was over. Humanity had broken it, not with words or diplomacy, but with the simple act of refusing to lose. Mobilize the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th armadas, she said quietly. If one armada was not enough, we will send 3. And we will send some support fleets. Humanity must learn that there are consequences for defiance. But even as she gave the orders, Haijin felt a cold touch of doubt. She had watched the battle footage carefully. She had seen how the humans fought, how they moved, how they thought. This was not a species that would break easily. This was not a species that had forgotten how to survive. On the Indomitable, Sejun stood at the observation window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was mobilizing. More ships, more weapons, more determination to crush humanity's rebellion. They would come, and humanity would fight again. But for now, for this moment, they had won. They had proven that the impossible was possible. They had shown the galaxy that humanity would rather die fighting than live kneeling, and that, Seojin knew, was the most important victory of all. The Galactic Assembly convened an emergency session 3 days after Beta Serpentis. The chamber that had been so confident when issuing their ultimatum now filled with nervous energy. Representatives whispered to each other, their voices creating a constant background hum that the translation system struggled to process. Talus stood at the council table, his ancient insectoid face unreadable. He had lived for 400 standard years and witnessed countless conflicts. But he had never seen anything like the footage that every delegate had watched. The systematic destruction of the Velan Fifth Armada played on repeat in his mind. We must respond with overwhelming force, Haijin declared. Her forearms moved in agitated patterns. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th armadas are already mobilizing. We will add Sun battle fleets and auxiliary forces from 6 other council members. Humanity will face the combined might of the Assembly. And what happens when they win again? The voice came from an unexpected source. Kanush, the Dreven Republic's ambassador, rarely spoke in council sessions. The Dreven were a middle-tier species, neither elder nor junior, content to observe and trade rather than lead. They cannot win against such force, Hyjin said, but her voice lacked its previous confidence. The Velen Fifth Armada was considered invincible, Kanush replied. He activated a holographic display that showed the battle footage. 312 ships, veteran crews, modern weapons. They lasted 3 hours. 3 hours. And the humans held back. They could have destroyed every ship but chose to cripple them instead. That speaks to capability and restraint. You defend them? Tholas asked. His mandibles clicked in a pattern that suggested confusion. I question us, Kanish said. I have reviewed the evidence that the human delegation released before they walked out. 300 years of documented interference. Treaties we violated while demanding they follow perfectly. Trade routes we sabotaged. Diplomats who died in convenient accidents. We pushed them until they had nowhere left to bend. The chamber erupted in angry voices. But Kanish continued, speaking over the noise. I reviewed our own history. 15 other junior races over the past millennium received similar ultimatums. All surrendered. Where are they now? Absorbed, scattered, their cultures dissolved. Their worlds governed by species that promised protection and delivered control. On Earth, Minho watched the assembly session through secure feeds. He sat in the Human Coordination Center, a facility built deep under the Rockies. Around him, diplomats and analysts monitored communications from across the galaxy. Kanish is doing good work, Doyan observed. He is raising questions that others thought but did not dare speak. It will not be enough, Minho said. Fear and pride are powerful things. The elder races cannot accept that they were wrong. They cannot accept that a junior race defeated them. They will escalate because the alternative is admitting they have been tyrants for 1,000 years. Guan entered the center carrying a datapad. Admiral Gunho reports all fleets are at ready status. We have confirmation that 3 more Velen armadas are moving toward our space. Sun battle fleets are mobilizing. 6 other species have committed auxiliary forces.
How many ships total?
Minho asked. Current estimate is 750 combat vessels with another 200 support ships. The room went quiet. 750 ships. Humanity had perhaps 300 combat-ready vessels, and that was after pulling everything from reserve. Can we win? Doyen asked quietly. Minho looked at the tactical displays. We can survive. And survival is its own kind of victory. Across human space, the news of the coming fleet spread. On Mars, in the vast underground cities, citizens watched broadcasts and prepared for war. On New Pyongyang, Yoongi and her fellow volunteers worked around the clock to strengthen orbital defenses. On every human world, the same scene repeated. No panic, no chaos. Just quiet, determined preparation. But there was something else happening too. Something the elder races did not anticipate. Sumi was a journalist for the Human Independent Network. She had spent 3 years researching galactic history, interviewing representatives from dozens of species, building a database of information that others thought unimportant. Now, she released it all. The documentary was called The Disappeared. It told the story of those 15 junior races that had accepted protective governance, showed how their cultures were systematically dismantled, how their languages were discouraged, then forbidden, how their populations were moved, scattered, mixed with other species, until nothing distinct remained. How their homeworlds were given to colonists from elder races who needed space to expand. The documentary spread across the blue, galactic networks like fire. Species that had never questioned the Assembly's benevolence suddenly saw it for what it was. A machine that consumed young civilizations and pretended it was mercy. In the assembly chamber, Kanish played clips from The Disappeared on the main display. Other delegates shouted for him to stop, but he continued. This is what we do, he said. This is what we have always done. We call it protection, but it is conquest. Slow, gentle conquest, but conquest nonetheless. And now humanity has said no. They have fought back and shown every other junior race that fighting back is possible. They are a threat, Hyjin insisted. Their military capabilities, their aggression, their refusal to accept proper authority. They will destabilize the entire galactic order. Perhaps the order deserves to be destabilized, Kanish replied. Within hours of that statement, the Dreven Republic announced it was withdrawing from all protective governance agreements and establishing a mutual defense treaty with humanity. The Corton League followed. Then the Velas combined. Then the Harpin worlds across the galaxy. Junior races that had spent centuries under the elder species' control suddenly saw an alternative. They saw humanity standing alone and refusing to fall. They saw the possibility of dignity without permission. On Luna. Admiral Junho watched his tactical displays as new data arrived. 5 junior races have announced defensive pacts with us. They are contributing ships to the defense fleet. How many ships? Asked his chief of staff. 200 combined? Most are converted civilian vessels, but they have crews who want to fight, and they understand their own ships better than we could. Junho studied the numbers. Humanity's 300 ships, plus 200 from their new allies. 500 total against 750? Still badly outnumbered, but no longer hopeless. What are their morale levels? Junho asked. High, sir. Very high. They are not fighting because they think they can win. They are fighting because they are tired of losing. Junho nodded slowly. He understood that feeling. It was what had carried humanity through 10,000 years of its own internal conflicts. The refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat seemed inevitable, in the Galactic Assembly. The Council of Dominants met in closed session. Oles looked at his fellow council members and felt something he had not expected to feel. Doubt. If we attack now, we attack a coalition, he said. Not just humanity, but 5 other species. If we win, we prove that we crush any opposition. If we lose, or even if we win at great cost, we prove that the system is unstable. What do you suggest? Hyjin asked coldly. Negotiation. A new treaty that gives junior races more autonomy while maintaining the Assembly's overall structure. That is weakness, said another council member. A being from a species so ancient, they no longer used individual names. The moment we negotiate from a position of anything less than total strength, the entire hierarchy collapses. The hierarchy is already collapsing, Kanesh said. He was not technically part of the council, but had been allowed to observe. You just have not admitted it yet. Back on Earth, Minho watched the debate and felt a complicated mixture of hope and fear. Hope that reason might prevail. Fear that it would not, and that the coming war would consume millions of lives. What happens next? Doyon asked. Minho looked at the tactical displays, at the diplomatic feeds, at the news networks showing protests on a dozen worlds. Junior races demanding more rights. Elder races demanding order. The galaxy splitting along lines that had been invisible until humanity refused to bow. Either they negotiate or they attack, Minho said. And honestly, I am not sure which option is more dangerous. If they negotiate, we win, but the system remains unstable. If they attack, we might lose everything. But if we survive, we prove that the old order is finished. And if we do not survive, Doyon asked quietly. Then, at least we died standing, Minho replied, and that will inspire others. That is what the elder races truly fear. Not that we will defeat them, but that we will inspire others to try. The galaxy held its breath. The fleets moved toward confrontation. And every species, from the eldest to the youngest, watched and wondered what kind of galaxy would emerge from the coming storm. The combined fleet of the Galactic Assembly entered the Centauri system 14 days after Beta Serpentis. 750 warships from 8 different species, the largest military force assembled in 2 centuries. They came for Earth itself, the human homeworld, to deliver a lesson that would echo across the galaxy for generations. Captain Juwan stood on the bridge of the forward defense. Station Sentinel. She had been promoted after Beta Serpentis, given command of the human forces that would meet this attack before it reached Earth. Behind her defense station, 500 ships waited. 300 human vessels and 200 from the allied junior races, against 750 of the assemblies. Finest Admiral Junho confirms we have authorization to engage at our discretion, her communication officer reported. G1 studied the tactical display. The assembly fleet advanced in 3 massive formations, strategy designed to overwhelm any defense through sheer concentrated firepower. It was textbook galactic warfare, refined over thousands of years. It was also predictable. Signal the fleet, she said. Execute pattern Omega. All ships maintain communication silence except for emergency channels. The defending fleet split into a dozen smaller groups, each moving on independent vectors. The assembly commanders watched with confusion as their enemies scattered rather than forming a defensive line. This was not how you defended a world. This was not proper military doctrine. Aboard the assembly flagship, Fleet Commander Varish studied his displays with growing concern. He was Sun, one of the insectoid species that had ruled their sector for 5 millennia. He had crushed 4 rebellions in his career and expected this to be the 5th. But the human defensive formation made no sense. They are running? His tactical officer suggested. No, Varish said slowly. They are positioning. But for what? He found out 7 minutes later. The human ships and their allies did not engage in long-range bombardment. They did not try to match the assembly's formation. Instead, they targeted the supply ships at the rear of each formation. The converted freighters, tankers, and ammunition vessels that kept a fleet operational during extended campaigns. G1 watched as the first wave of human ships tore through the assembly's supply lines. Railgun slugs and missiles destroyed or crippled every support vessel before the main fleet could react. Without supplies, without fuel, without ammunition reserves, the assembly fleet would have to withdraw or fight a quick, decisive battle. And humanity was very good at quick, decisive battles. Second wave, execute, Giwan ordered. 200 allied ships swept around the assembly's flank. They were not as fast or as well-armed as human vessels, but their crews fought with desperate courage. They knew what defeat meant. They had lived under assembly control and refused to return to it. The Battle of Centauri became a chaotic series of small engagements spread across 3-dimensional space. The assembly's advantage in numbers meant nothing when their formation was disrupted and their supply lines severed. Every time they tried to regroup, human ships appeared from unexpected angles, striking hard and fast before disappearing again. On Earth, Yunji watched the battle feeds from the defense center on New Pyongyang. She was not there anymore. She had been called to Earth itself to help coordinate the planet's final defenses. If the fleet failed, if the assembly broke through, she would be among those who fought in orbit above humanity's home world. "They are holding," said the defense coordinator, a veteran officer named Taijin who had served on the Indomitable at Beta Serpentis. "The assembly is taking heavy losses." "So are we," Yunji replied. The feeds showed human ships exploding, allied vessels torn apart, debris fields where moments before there had been living crews. The cost of this battle would be measured in tens of thousands of lives. But they were holding. Against impossible odds, against overwhelming numbers. The combined fleet was holding. Aboard the Indomitable, Seojin commanded a squadron of 12 ships that harassed the assembly's center formation. His mission was simple: keep them busy, keep them confused, keep them from organizing an effective push toward Earth. "Enemy battleship targeting us," Yuna reported. "Multiple missiles inbound. Evasive pattern 7, Seojin ordered. The Indomitable rolled and dove, pushing its engines to limits that made the hull groan. Missiles detonated around them, close enough that the radiation made their sensors scream, and engineering Nari worked frantically to maintain power flow. The reactors were running at 140% capacity, well beyond any safe limit. But safe limits were for peacetime. This was war. "Reactor 3 is showing stress fractures," she reported. "I need to shut it down, or it will fail catastrophically." "Can we fight on 2 reactors?" Seojin asked. "We can fight. We cannot run. Then we fight," Seojin decided. "Shut down Reactor 3. Route all power to weapons and shields." The Indomitable became a stationary target, but it became a target that could hit back with devastating force. Its railguns fired continuously, each slug carrying enough kinetic energy to punch through any shield in the assembly fleet. Its missiles launched in salvo after salvo. Nuclear-pumped lasers burning through armor that had protected ships for centuries. 3. Assembly vessels concentrated fire on the Indomitable. Scipion watched his shield strength drop, watched the damage reports pile up, watched his crew work with desperate efficiency to keep the ship fighting. "Captain," Una said quietly, "we need to withdraw." "Not yet," Scipion replied. He checked the tactical display. The assembly center formation was breaking apart, ships peeling away to avoid the Indomitable's fire. One ship making a stand was worth 10 ships running. Not yet. The Indomitable died the way it had lived, fighting. A Tizan battleship scored a direct hit on the forward section, killing Una and 30 other crew members instantly. Another hit disabled the remaining reactors. The ship went dark, drifting powerless in the void. "Abandon ship," Scipion ordered. "All hands to escape pods." He stayed on the bridge until the last pod launched, then made his way to his own escape pod. As he sealed the hatch and ejected, he looked back at his ship. The Indomitable had been his home for 8 years. Now it was a tomb, a memorial to those who had fought and died to protect humanity's freedom. But the Indomitable's sacrifice mattered. The assembly's center formation was broken, their advance stalled. Other human ships exploited the gap, striking deep into their lines. Admiral Junho watched from Luna as the battle reached its 14th hour. Both sides were exhausted, their ships damaged, their crews pushed beyond normal endurance. But the assembly was breaking first. Their commanders, trained in traditional warfare, could not adapt to humanity's chaotic, aggressive tactics. "The San fleet is requesting permission to withdraw," reported his chief of staff. "Denied," Junho said. "This is their fight as much as ours now." But the San withdrew anyway, their ships breaking formation and retreating toward safe distance. Other assembly vessels followed. Within an hour, what had been an organized invasion force became a fleeing mob. Captain Juan did not order pursuit. Her fleet was too damaged, too exhausted. They had one, but barely. Of the 500 ships that had started the battle, only 230 remained combat capable. Thousands were dead. Tens of thousands were wounded. But Earth still stood. Humanity still stood, and the assembly had been defeated. In the Galactic Assembly Chamber, Hyjin watched the battle footage in silence. Around her, council members argued, shouted, blamed each other, but she knew the truth. They had lost. Not just a battle, but the war. The old order was finished. Kanish stood and spoke into the chaos. "Enough. We have lost because we deserved to lose. Now we must negotiate or face more of this. How many more ships must die defending a system that was always unjust?" Tholis looked at the ancient being across from him, the one who had insisted on total victory. That being said nothing. The silence was admission enough. "Send a message to Earth," Tholis said. "Request formal negotiations for a new treaty. One that recognizes human sovereignty and provides autonomy for all junior races." On Earth, Minho received the message 3 hours after the battle ended. He read it twice, then looked at Doyen and Jiwan, who had survived the battle but lost an arm in the fighting. "They want to negotiate," Minho said. "Do we accept?" Doyen asked. "We accept," Minho replied. "But we negotiate from strength, not desperation. We demand full sovereignty. We demand an end to protective governance for all species. We demand representation on the Council of Dominance." "They will never agree to all of that," Guan said. "Then we continue fighting until they do," Minho said simply. "We have proven we can win. Now we prove we can build something better than what existed before." 6 months later, the Treaty of Concordia was signed. Humanity received full sovereign status and a permanent seat on the Council of Dominance. The protective governance system was abolished. 12 junior races formed a defensive alliance with humanity, creating a new power block that balanced the elder races. Scipion, rescued from his escape pod and recovering from his injuries, attended the signing ceremony. He watched Minho walk into the assembly chamber, this time not as a junior delegate, but as an equal. The same representatives who had demanded humanity's surrender now offered careful respect.